Broke? Yeah, okay, I hear you saying. We see just how wealthy he is in the show, spending the prize money he won in the games. How could he possibly be broke? But that's just it, friends. Gi-hun spends a lot of money. Like, a lot of money. Very, very quickly. Enough that I have to again ask, would Gi-hun actually be broke? Well, the answer is going to tell us a lot about this character and the dark path that he's walking down. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that's played these games before.
I said I played these games before!
This show's also feeling a bit under the weather at the moment. I only get sick about once a year, but it's always rough, so sorry about the voice. Anyway, so Squid Game. Yeah, the latest season of this enormous Netflix hit is finally out, and everyone's talking about it. You, me, Duolingo, the guy in front of you in line at the gas station, everyone. And that makes a lot of sense when you realize that in just the few weeks it's been out, Squid Game Season 2 is already Netflix's third most viewed season of TV ever, behind only Wednesday and Squid Game Season 1. People love this series, and I bet that Season 3 is also going to be on this chart, and that we're eventually going to be getting a ton of other spin-offs. Squid Game 1985, Squid Game America, Squid Game in Space. Yeah, Netflix is going to be ignoring the message of this show and milking it until the end of time. Real talk though, American Squid Game with American schoolyard games would actually be a lot of fun. Like, imagine Dodgeball or The Floor is Lava. Should I do a theory predicting that? Like, please leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe so you know if we eventually do that one. If you don't know, Squid Game is all about a competition where desperate people compete in children's playground games for a cash prize. But if they lose, they die. This latest season follows Gi-hun, the only survivor from Season 1, as he uses his winnings to try to track down and put an end to the games once and for all. And let me tell you, Gi-hun won a ton of money from the games. 45.6 billion won, or about $31.4 million to be exact. That's a life-changing amount of money for anyone, but to be honest with you, it's not an infinite amount of money. And here's the thing, loyal theorists, Gi-hun does not shy away from using his hard-won cash, burning through tons and tons by settling his debts, stocking up on weaponry, buying real estate, hiring dozens of people to track down the salesman for months at a time. That was a pretty big red flag for me because a lot of people who suddenly come into money end up spending all of it. 78% of NFL athletes file for bankruptcy within just 2 years of retiring, and some sources estimate that nearly 70% of lottery winners do the same. So today, I want to find out, would Gi-hun be broke? If we counted up all the money we see him spending, find the price of all the items we see him using in this new season, how much would it cost? And could his 45.6 billion won prize money actually cover all of it? Well, after digging into it, the answer surprised me a bit, and it's gonna tell us a lot about Gi-hun as a character and where his story is going in Season 3. So strap in, loyal theorists, we're hiring a small army of goons and tracking down this answer. Now, before we get started, we need to know exactly how much Gi-hun started out with. Like, yeah, he won 45.6 billion won from the games, but when you have money, that money makes money. It's all about the interest, baby. Yeah, Gi-hun didn't touch his winnings for a year after the games, and I mean, who could blame him after seeing his friends all get killed right in front of his eyes? That means that his winnings sat in an account and did very little. The bank even bothered him about this.
You've got all your money set up in a normal savings account. You aren't earning all that much interest on it.
Ha, did you catch that? Gi-hun wasn't earning all that much interest, but he was still getting something. For South Korean banks, the base interest rate for a savings account is 0.1%. So after a year of sitting there, Gi-hun's 45.6 billion won would have gotten him an additional 456 million won. That's about $313,000, leaving him now with a starting total of 46 million won. So now that we know that, what did he spend it on? Just to get some of the smaller things out of the way, we know that Gi-hun started fresh at the end of Season 1 by getting fresh. He gets a new haircut, dyes it, and purchases a suit, all before getting a plane ticket from Seoul, South Korea to Los Angeles, California to see his daughter. We also see in Season 2 that he's driving what looks like a 2012 Hyundai Santa Fe, which I'm assuming he bought instead of rented. In the grand scheme of things, these are pretty minor purchases and would only really account for about 9.52 million won, or just over $6,500. Chump change change if we're being honest, especially compared with his first huge expense. In Season 1, Gi-hun says,
"I'd pay my debt off first."
Which makes sense because Gi-hun owes a lot of money. Like, a lot of money.
160 million won owed just to loan sharks, and you owe 250 more to the bank.
Yeah, between the bank and the loan sharks, Gi-hun is a staggering 410 million won or $281,000 in debt. And that's without even counting the interest. So let's count the interest. Starting with the banks, we know Gi-hun took out loans to start a small business, a chicken shop and a small snack bar, both of which failed. Typical interest rates for similar small business loans in South Korea are about 3.25%. So in the year between the salesman laying out Gi-hun's debts and when he paid it off after the games, he'd owe the bank an additional 8 million won or about $5,500. But figuring out how much interest he'd owe the loan sharks is going to be a little bit trickier here. Thankfully for us, and unfortunately for other people, there is data we can pull for this. Ever since the pandemic, a lot of loan sharks have really thrived off the economic insecurity of others, lending money to those vulnerable at exorbitant rates, some as high as 200% interest. Given Gi-hun's aggressive run-in with the loan sharks earlier in the series, we're going to assume that he was forced to pay that insane rate of 200%, increasing his debt from 160 million won to 320 million won. That's almost $220,000. So, all in all, Gi-hun paid a total of 578 million won, $396,000 to clear his debts. But those aren't the only debts he settled. Just before he died, Gi-hun's childhood friend Sang-woo, player 218, made a request of Gi-hun. Sang-woo wants Gi-hun to help his mother, and boy does Gi-hun deliver. Before leaving to see his daughter, Gi-hun drops off an airline luggage suitcase full of cold hard cash and a note reading, "It's the money I owe Sang-woo." Now, I've seen a lot of folks online theorizing that Gi-hun paid her half of the prize money, but I don't think that's the case. Like, you're not about to fit 22.8 billion won in a Delta Airlines carry-on. So, how much money is in this suitcase? Well, we're gonna have to do some quick math to figure it out. Just looking at the suitcase when it's opened, we can see that there's bands of money stacked, 2 columns by 6 rows on both sides of the suitcase. But how many bands deep are these stacks? Well, individual bills are about 0.0043 inches thick. That's about 0.11 millimeters. Bundles of cash like this are known as currency straps and typically hold 100 notes. So a band of 100 would be 0.43 inches thick. We'll just round that up to half an inch to account for the band material holding them together and the air between the bills. Most suitcases like these are usually about 9 inches thick, while the hard shell of these sorts of suitcases are usually 12 to 15 millimeters thick, or about half an inch. So a full inch for both sides. That leaves us about 8 inches of space inside the suitcase. So using that knowledge, we can figure out that these stacks are 8 bands deep on both sides of the suitcase, giving us a total number of 192 bands inside. We can see that these are 50,000 won notes, so each strap is worth 5 million won, meaning that there's a total of 960 million won in here. Hell, we see that Gi-hun also stuffed some other stacks in the smaller spaces in the side of the suitcase, so let's make it an even billion won, or $685,000. But Gi-hun may have done even more to help out Sang-woo's mother. See, Sang-woo, like Gi-hun, was deep in debt.
6 billion won.
6 billion?
So far in debt that he was putting his mother's properties and shop up as collateral, and she lost everything because of it. Considering that Sang-woo entered the games to pay off that debt, I'm assuming that 6 billion won was still outstanding. And if Gi-hun is really gonna take care of Sang-woo's mother, he probably paid it off so she could open up a new shop and thrive just like we see in Season 2. So adding that in, that's a total of 7 billion won, $4.8 million that Gi-hun spent to help Sang-woo's mother. And finally, we know that Sang-woo's family wasn't the only one he helped with the cash earned from the Squid Game. Gi-hun also paid a smuggler to get Se-byak's mother out of North Korea. In Season 1, this was quoted at costing a pretty penny.
Oh, I'd say around 40 million or so won.
Which we know that Gi-hun actually overpaid for thanks to Season 2.
If the problem is money, I can get you more.
No. Last time you gave me more than enough money.
So we're gonna actually round that up to 45 million won, or about $31,000, since Gi-hun gave the smuggler more than enough money. Whew, so that's a lot of big numbers I just threw out at you, so let's take a breather and see where Gi-hun is at so far. Just by the end of Season 1, between paying off his debts, fulfilling the dying wishes of his friends from the games, and spending a little bit on himself, Gi-hun has spent a staggering 7,632,520,000 won, or $5,237,000. That's almost 20% of the prize money, and we haven't even gotten into the craziest stuff yet. How? Why? Well, that's because because Gihan basically hired his own army of private detectives. Yeah, by the beginning of Season 2, we learn that Gihan has not only paid back his loan shark, but has also hired him to help find the salesman. And he is going hard on that manhunt.
We checked. All the subway stations, still nothing. We've been searching for 2 years, and there's still no sign of him.
Yeah, they've been searching for the salesman on and off for 2 years. That's a ton of time to be going subway station to subway station or waiting on a bench looking for a guy playing a schoolyard game with strangers. But it's not just the loan shark looking, he's also spearheading a group of 9 other guys also on the hunt, so 10 in total. So how much would Gihan be paying these guys? Well, obviously we can't say for sure, but we do get a bit of a clue when the loan shark berates one of his workers.
You're down here in the middle of summer in this nice AC, making easy money sitting on your... You don't like it? Then go ahead, work construction.
The loan shark is saying that this job is somewhat comparable to construction, but way easier. Korean construction workers in the Seoul area earn about 42 million won, or $30,000 a year, coming out at roughly $15
$30,000 a year? Wait, no way, no way. I do 12 hours shows construction in Canada, and it's like, it was like $20 an hour, so that's like what, 240 times 5, that's $1,200 a week I was making, and then times that by 5. Well, I'm not working every single thing, but it's like times that by 5, 1250, 6,000 a month, times that by 12, 60,000, $72,000 a year. What I would have been paid technically if I was working all of that shit, but we do get like 3-4 days off, so it's not quite accurate. Somewhere around there. This is way under that for what they're saying here. At least when I was working at a construction job, like in Canada.
Generous in saying that Gihan is paying each of these guys 30,000 won, or $20 an hour, so they don't go looking for other work. So, okay, that's the rate we're gonna say, but how long have they been working? Well, it's a bit unclear just how long this group has been searching for the salesman. One of the guys hired by the loan shark says that
We've had our boys searching the whole subway system all summer long.
this, combined with Gihan mentioning that the salesman found him around this time,
It was around this time of year. If I miss this opportunity, then that's a whole nother year I have to wait.
means that the manhunt probably only happened during the 3 months of summer, so every day for 6 months in total during the past 2 years. If Gihan has been paying for these guys for 12-hour days,
When'd you search?
10 in the morning till 10 at night.
at that rate of 30,000 won an hour, that means that in total he paid these guys at least 655 million won, or just about $450,000. That is a lot of cash, and it gets even more intense when Gihan ups the group searching to a 44-man team, monitoring the subways for the entire time they're open, from 6 a.m. to midnight, 18 hours a day. We can see from the calendars in this episode that this part of the manhunt goes from June 19th until August 31st, so 74 days. Using the same math, that's an additional 1.758 billion won, or $1.229 million. And on top of that, Gihan also promises another 1 billion won, about $685,000, as a reward for finding the salesman.
If we find that duck cheap laying piece of Song said we get a 1 billion won reward.
Which we will assume that he pays out since they do end up finding him. All in all, just to track down the salesman, Gihan burned 3.413 billion won, or $2.386 million. And mind you, it wasn't like Gihan was just twiddling his thumbs, waiting for a call from these guys searching the subways 24/7. Oh no, he was preparing, stocking up on guns and ammo to make sure he was ready to take on the people running the games. But here's the thing, this is actually very impressive in South Korea. See, South Korea has strict gun control laws, and that means that to this day, it's difficult to get your hands on any firearms, which drives up their price on the black market to an enormous degree. By how much? Well, that was a bit tricky to put an exact number on because, frankly, I don't know how to deep dive into the Korean black market to find prices of illegal firearms. I am already on so many watch lists from what I have to research for this job, that was not another one I needed on my back. But I was able to find this article that laid out the price of assault rifles rifles on the black market in Australia, which has similarly tight regulations. This claims that assault weapons can cost upwards of $15,000 or 21.9 million won each. The price of pistols is similarly tricky to track down, but I did find some South Korean pistols that were valued at $530 each here in the United States. Assault weapons typically sell for about $1,000 here in the States, which is just about double the price of that pistol. This is an incredibly rough estimate, but we'll assume that the pistols on the black market are also worth about half as much as an assault weapon, so about 10.95 million won or $7,500 each. Judging from the scene where we see Gi-hun's collection of weaponry in his hotel bathroom, he has about 10 handguns, 30 assault rifles, and just buckets of ammunition. The weaponry here alone would cost 766.5 million won. That's a ton, and we're just gonna say that the ammunition for all of these guns would round this up to an even billion won. But the craziest thing about that last paragraph, well, remember how I said that all of these guns were in Gi-hun's hotel bathroom? Well, I meant that literally. This is Gi-hun's bathroom, as in he has to own the building for a number of reasons. First of all, he's the only tenant we ever see, and no one else can even get in. Secondly, we see that he owns and runs all of the security for the building. And thirdly, we see Gi-hun and his team firing their guns in the hotel. There's no way they're gonna be able to get away with that if they've just like rented a floor. Nah, Gi-hun has to own this whole building, and that would make this the single biggest expense that he has. See, while the show paints this hotel as a dingy, rundown, ragtag building that Gi-hun probably acquired on the cheap, that couldn't be further from the truth. Real estate is expensive, kids. This hotel is actually a real building that very much exists in the real world, and this can give us a very good idea of just how much Gi-hun would have needed to spend on it. See, this building is in Seoul, the capital city of South Korea, and it's one of the largest cities in the world. Like, for real, it beats out both London and San Francisco in terms of population. If you took all the people in New York City, added another 2 million people, and then reduced the size by 70 square miles, bam, you get Seoul. And because of that, getting any sort of real estate in the greater Seoul metropolitan area is gonna cost you a pretty penny. Not only that, but this hotel is located in Guri, just east of Seoul proper, and just about an hour train ride from the heart of the city. It's also located near some notable landmarks and attractions itself, including the Hongyan University Guri Hospital, the Guri City Hall, and even a new extension of the Seoul Subway Line 8. Now, I wish I could tell you the exact real estate value of this building, but it hasn't actually sold or been on the market in the real world for a long time. That being said, similar 4-story properties in the area have been sold for somewhere between 2.7 and 7 billion won. That's about 1.9 and 4.8 million dollars. Given the location, we're going to say that this building cost Gi-hun that larger figure, so 7 billion won or 4.8 million dollars. And that isn't even counting electricity or water costs, or the fact that Gi-hun doesn't like let people stay as guests to make some money, and it's just wild stuff. So with all of those numbers crunched, we come to the grand total of, drumroll please, 19,045,760,000 won, or $13,310,244. You know, honestly, I gotta say, that's actually much less than I expected. Out of Gi-hun's total 45.6 billion won prize, that's actually only about 44% of the total amount of cash Gi-hun took home from the Squid Game. So maybe he was living within his means. He's still not broke, and everything lines up, is what I would be saying, except for one crucial detail. We actually physically see how much money Gi-hun has, and the math here ain't mathing. Let me explain. Yeah, in Season 2, we see Gi-hun's hoard of cash piled up in bands of 5 million won on a bed in his hotel.
Holy hell, you really did win.
And no doubt, that's a lot of cash, enough to make even Walter White proud.
I gotta do it, man.
But just how much cash is in here? This money, cube? Money rectangular prism? Whatever, is 7 bands of cash wide by 20 bands long by roughly 60 bands high. And as you can clearly see, part of the money stack here in the corner has been spent across 3 rows and 7 columns. Using the height of the affected money stacks, we can estimate that about 5% of this pile is gone. Man, that's a lot of numbers, but putting all of that information together, we can say that this giant pile of cash is roughly 38,325,000,000 won, just a little bit more than $26 million. So, I don't know about you, but when I was looking at these numbers, I immediately saw that they weren't lining up. Gi-hun won 45.6 billion won, spent 19 billion, and yet still has over 38 billion left? That just cannot be the case. Unless Gi-hun broke his moral code to expand his wealth. And that could have a huge impact of where this character is going in Season 3. All throughout the second season, we see Gi-hun grappling with survivor's guilt and the morality of having all of this cash. In fact, during Season 2's games, when asked if he'd already spent all the prize money, Gi-hun explains,
That money doesn't belong to me. The ones who died in this place, that's their blood money.
he considers all of the cash he won to be blood money. He spent an entire year refusing to touch it because it would be a breach of his morality. In fact, he's downright ambivalent at the idea of doing anything with it. We see this in Season 1 when the bank holding his money wants to help him grow his billions.
And recently, our bank began offering these consultations for VIPs looking to expand their financial assets.
What does Gi-hun do with this offer? Nothing. He basically scoffs and leaves. But the numbers don't lie.
My bank
He had to choose
asked
to
me that
invest
as
his
well
blood
because they
money and
noticed I had so
expand
much
his own
cash in
wealth.
my bank.
I
They're
won't
like,
bore
you
by
want
going through them
that?
all right
I'm
here,
like,
but
nah,
after
I'm
looking into
good.
investments and percentages and all that, the numbers he'd need are even realistic. Regardless, even if expanding his hoard of wealth like Scrooge McDuck was an attempt to bring down the games, this was a stark shift in Gi-hun's character and morality that is foreshadowing something darker for this character. Like, sure, it might not seem like that big of a deal when it's just about Gi-hun making money with his money, even if he considers it blood money. And yet, don't know if you've noticed, but the more and more leadership Gi-hun has taken both inside and out of the games, the more and more he started leaning on the idea that the ends justify the means. And this is probably best shown by this interaction right here.
What you're saying is sacrifice a few for the good of the rest.
If we don't go after them now, we won't get another shot at leaving this place.
Yeah, Gi-hun is absolutely willing to let as many contestants die during that big fight in the night if it means they have a chance to take down the games. I don't know about you, but to me, that sounds an awful lot like something the frontman would say. Way more than it does something Season 1 Gi-hun would. And that, my friends, is the takeaway here. In the end, Gi-hun chose to sacrifice his morality, bit by bit, all for what he views as the greater good. And now that his little rebellion against the frontman has been stopped, that he's basically been taken prisoner, I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to break Gi-hun and turn him into the next frontman. And really, wouldn't that be a bittersweet ending for both this character and for the series? To have this good-hearted person with the best of intentions truly corrupted by the power and influence of money. Sounds exactly like what a brutal critique of capitalism this show is clearly going for. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut. Up next on Film Theory.
Could the Squid Game be legal? Let's just say that the answer isn't as clear-cut as you might expect.
The life of every firebending, from Avatar. Firebending, one of the 4 elemental bending arts, is the pyrokinetic ability to control and produce fire. It is unique among the bending arts, as it's the only one in which the performer can generate the element. The first human firebenders lived in a city atop a lion turtle during the era of Rava, and the art later spread to the Sun Warriors, the Fire Nation, and the United Republic of Nations. The Earth Kingdom also has a small firebending minority. Welcome to the Amagi. In today's video, we're going over the life of every known firebender in Avatar. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. Now, before we dive into the lives of every firebender we know, let's take a quick look at firebending's history. During the era of Rava, people received the element of fire from the fire lion turtle that was the guardian of their city, who would grant them the power with energy bending. They could request it whenever they ventured into the spirit wilds and were to return it when they came back. However, Juan stole the power to better his life and that of his impoverished friends, but was captured and banished. He was allowed to keep the power of fire to protect himself and eventually befriended the spirits. As such, he managed to hone his skills by learning the proper way of bending from the dragons that lived in the spirit wilds. He developed his style in such a manner that his fire became an extension of his body, rather than a mere tool for protection as the others perceived it. Others learned of his survival and also set out into the spirit wilds with the power of fire, no longer wanting to live under poor conditions they had in the city. In the following years, people learned firebending from the dragons that had once populated the land. The first people in the era of the Avatar to learn from the dragons were the Sun Warriors, who understood the connection between the fire of their souls, the fire of the dragons, and the sun. In the remains of their once great civilization, Zuko and Aang discovered that firebending represents energy and life, a concept that had been lost to nearly all firebenders in the 100-Year War. The true meaning of firebending was forgotten as anger, rage, and a desire to dominate began to replace the ideals of life and energy, and how they connect to the sun. The Fire Nation royal family encouraged this to aid in the propaganda that fire could be used as a tool to destroy, and that the 100-Year War was justified. Firebenders draw their power from the sun and other solar objects, such as comets, as well as the fiery core of the planet. A solar eclipse has the potential to completely negate a firebender's power, which is the result of a direct connection between the sun and firebending. Additionally, after defeating Katara at sunrise during the Siege of the North, Zuko stated that she rose with the moon, but he rose with the sun, further referencing the sun's importance to firebending. Firebenders are also said to draw power from volcanic energy and lightning. Though firebending children exhibit an instinct not to burn themselves, they still can be a significant danger to those around them as long as they cannot control their powers. To enable parents to take precautions, Fire Nation citizens traditionally subject newborns to a test to determine whether they are firebenders. For this test, the parents, or someone else, acquire a ball of shredded birch bark and cotton seeped in special oils. The ball is fluffed with the fingers until it is wispy and cloud-like. Finally, the ball is held under the child's nose. Normally, a firebending child's simple breathing and innate ability will cause the ball to catch fire after a few seconds. According to Heron, a highly experienced firebending teacher, this test almost always works. However, some newborns are not conclusively identified as firebenders. For example, Zuko was almost cast from the Fire Nation Royal Palace as he lacked the spark in his eyes that is typical for most firebenders. For children whose bending is unclear, a challenging, competitive, and aggressive environment is believed to be helpful in drawing out firebending abilities. Jaya, Wan's lifetime. Jaya was Wan's friend and one of the first firebenders in the world. Along with the other impoverished citizens from his city, Jaya ventured into the spirit wilds to start a new life and escape the tyranny of the Cho family. Jaya lived in a treehouse on the outskirts of a city atop a lion turtle who would bestow the ability to bend fire upon its inhabitants. Unlike Wan, he was originally resigned to his fate as a commoner, depending entirely on food that Wan stole in order to survive, though Jaya continued to discourage stealing from the Cho family. After Wan stole the ability to bend fire from the lion turtle on which he lived, Jaya expressed uncertainty about looting the Cho palace, and reiterated that it was illegal to bring the ability to bend into the city. Regardless of his own warning, Jaya accompanied Wan and several other villagers on a raid of the Cho palace. After a successful raid, Jaya escaped along with the other villagers while Wan remained to fight off the guards and the Cho brothers. The following day, Jaya and Yao witnessed Wan's banishment to the spirit wilds and lamented his fate, under the belief that he would die within a day. When an expedition of hunters returned and confirmed that Wan had been living among the spirits and protecting the spirit oasis, Jaya resolved to venture into the wilds as well, believing himself capable of surviving if Wan had done the same. After obtaining the ability to firebend, Jaya and several other villagers settled in the spirit wilds, though engaged in several conflicts against hostile spirits, for whom he developed a deep hatred after losing Yao and several other friends. With the use of firebending, he began to burn down trees with the other villagers. However, this was done to a great extent, thereby catching the attention of Rava and Wan. Shortly after reuniting with his friend, Jaya engaged in an altercation with an Ai spirit and several others. Though Wan and Rava tried to mediate between the parties, tensions rose, and Jaya was set on having his revenge on the spirits who took so many of his friends. After the spirits were corrupted by Vatu, Jaya was the first to attack, throwing a fireball at the dark Ai spirits, instigating a fight. Jaya was surprised when Wan halted the fight by bending all 4 elements, though after he passed out due to the strain on his body caused by Rava's presence inside him, Jaya resumed battling with the spirits and was eventually killed. Thapa, Yang Chen's lifetime. Thappa was a firebender who became one of the earliest combustion benders in recorded history, and was planned to be used by the Shang merchants as a human weapon in order to break free of the authority of the Four Nations. Thappa was one of many chosen to develop an extremely dangerous firebending technique in order to be used by the Shang merchants as a human weapon in the Unanimity Project. The experimentation that led him to develop combustion bending was made possible due to the research of Zongdu Chaisi of Jonduri. Many others did not survive the ordeal and drowned in the process. Aside from Thappa, only 2 others survived, Yingsu and Xiaoyun. When Unanimity was dispatched from Jonduri to Bin-Er, the 3 combustion benders boarded the Queen of Omashu, a ponderous 5-masted junk. During the voyage, they guarded 3 large wooden boxes carrying rocks, which acted as a decoy to those who thought Unanimity would be an actual object. They were very tight-lipped to other crew members, such as Kavik. They ate twice as much as everyone else to preserve their energy and their strength, and slept in shifts. Once the ship arrived, Kavik saw that the crates were full of chopped seal blanks, and realized that the benders were in fact Unanimity itself. During the display of Unanimity's power that Zongdu Hensha had planned, Xiaoyun and Yingsu were posted in separate apartments deeper inside Bin-Er, while Thappa stayed by the Zongdu's side as his blasts were the most powerful of the 3 combustion benders. He stood near a window on the outskirts of the city to keep the Earth King's forces at bay, and Hensha had to carry trays of buns and dumplings to him so he could quickly regain his physical energy after using his bending. When Thappa sensed movement, he fired a warning shot, with a seed of fire quickly erupting into an inferno. The movement stopped, and Thappa had the Earth Kingdom Scout Brigade penned into a tree line. He suggested blowing apart the ground on occasion to make earthbenders tunnel into the city if they were fearful of cave-ins. When Thappa took a break to eat, he discussed parts of how he came by his power to Hensha, speaking a little bit of his torturous training. He then directed the conversation to payment, telling Hensha that the situation had changed since they last bargained. Thappa knew that Hensha was hanging on by his fingernails and that everything had been one big demonstration of power. He then went on to say that this meant it was him, Yingsu, and Xiaoyun who now controlled whether Bin-Er was open for business, rather than the Shangs, as their value had taken a leap skyward. Thappa demanded a payment 20 times the original sum, causing Hensha to panic. Thappa knew his leverage was lost, telling him that Hensha no longer held any tiles in the game, as he had played them all. While Hensha agreed, he told Thappa that the threat was ambiguous to the people of the city, as no one had been killed. He encouraged Thappa to demonstrate his true power by drawing some blood, and Thappa began to aim for the homes of the Water Tribe quarter. Thappa prepared for a huge explosion, taking 30 breaths, which would almost completely obliterate the district. He took several more breaths, with Hensha wondering what was going on, and Thappa explained he could not get enough air. He quickly fell unconscious as Avatar Yang Chen had been able to raid the area, removing the air from the room but returning it in enough time to keep Thappa alive. Akudan seized Hensha, and the group went on to take down Yingsu, bringing an end to the Unanimity Project. As Yang Chen could not expose the truth behind Unanimity to the Earth Kingdom, she had 3 combustion benders contained in plots of land along the mountains of the Northern Air Temple, and made monks renowned for their martial prowess watch over them. After meeting with Earth King Fei Shan and Ba Sing Se, she came to the hamlet where Thappa was being held. He was gardening as she found him, telling her that he'd been given some mountain flower seeds that did well in winter, wondering if he would see them bloom, wondering how long he would remain where he was. Yang Chen told him that it depended on if he was willing to answer her questions, but Thappa said he was not willing to share yet, saying that he had enjoyed his little vacation, as rich people paid a lot for the kind of setup that he had. Yang Chen had come to realize that the combustion benders were not mere pawns, but players in their own right in the game of politics. The Avatar told him to let her know if he changed his mind, telling him he may stay until summer. This horrified Abbot Sonam, who feared that the monks would be corrupted by the desire to hold dominion over another human being if he was confined to the temple for that long. Raite, Yang Chen's lifetime. Raite was a firebender from the Natsuo Island chain who was recruited by the Unanimity Project during the era of Yang Chen. Raite was tortured by being partially drowned in hopes of him becoming one of the first combustion benders in recorded history. Raite survived the program, although he did not develop true combustion bending like the adult firebenders. He was left abandoned on an island and later killed in a scuffle after he betrayed Avatar Yang Chen while supposedly cooperating with her to escape the island. Raite was born on the remote Natsuo Island chain, situated on waters that were not fully controlled by either the Fire Nation or the Earth Kingdom. The archipelago offered few opportunities for work, and thus Raite joined up with the unmarked ship, recruiting islanders and offering to pay them, regardless of age or fitness. They made it clear that Raitei stood to earn more than most as he was a bender. This recruitment was part of an early phase of the Unanimity Project, as Zhongdu Chai-Si tried to create human weapons of mass destruction under her mental conditioning to give her unlimited leverage against the four nations. Raitei was separated from the Earthbenders and non-benders upon his arrival. He and the other firebenders in the project were chained underwater in an attempt to have them fight against the surrounding pressure and exert as much force and will as one could in a single blast, like an explosion. Raitei was able to make the initial breakthrough, which was only possible if a firebender truly believed they were going to die. Many firebenders drowned during training. Though Raitei survived the initial experiments, there were other stages required to become a true combustion bender, and only Thapa, Yingsu, and Xiaoyun were chosen to continue, with combustion bending proving the most successful by far of Unanimity's various experiments. Raitei eventually saw the trio taken away on a ship elsewhere. Raitei felt disdain for Xiaoyun, thinking that the man was smug for grinning at them and waving farewell as they left. He remained on the island for some time after the combustion benders left. Around the time of Unanimity's demonstration in Bin-Er, the camp runners suddenly left. New recruits and supply boats stopped coming to the island, with only around 24 participants left there. Raitei joined up with Hsien, a non-bender girl who had developed a basic form of chi blocking from intense practice at unarmed combat. The adults scavenged rotting longboats and tried to flee, but told the two children that there was not enough space for them. However, a storm struck that very night, and the two children believed that they were the only survivors on the island left alive. Raitei and Hsien survived in a grotto for the next few months, surviving on bread nut and fresh water that trickled down into the grooves from rocks above. On a day when their campfire had turned to ashes and there was no water in the grotto, the pair approached a disguised avatar Yang Chen on the island. The avatar had come to investigate evidence of unanimity with her companions, Kavik and Jujinta. Kavik heard the sound of their footsteps and drew a blade of water from the skin at his side. Upon seeing the haggard appearance of the children, he reformed the water into a less threatening sphere instead, stating that he was not going to hurt them. The pair licked their lips in thirst upon seeing fresh water, and Kavik offered them some. However, Hsien lunged toward him and punched him with a single knuckle in his palm, grabbing his pouch as the children fled along the beach. Raitei and Hsien were making their way up a scarp by their grotto by the time Yang Chen and her companions caught up. With the children now sticking out on the cliff's surface and being potentially vulnerable to the Avatar's group, they slowly clambered down the sand when Yang Chen asked them to do so. Both the Avatar and Kavik offered them fresh water and more food, asking what had happened. Just as the airbender prepared to reveal her identity as the Avatar, Jujinta approached them instead, offering to speak to Raitei and Hsien in a language they understood. He demonstrated his abilities to bounce a knife into a peach-sized chunk of driftwood 20 paces away. The second knife struck home before it landed, and Jujinta also demonstrated with a third knife for show. The block of wood landed neatly on a new tripod, and the children were astonished that he'd been able to juggle an object with just the points of his blades. He explained he could perform this feat because he had grown up on an island like theirs, and knew that the extent of his own abilities represented dozens who could not make the cut. He stated that the group could choose to behave like those that ran the camp and only take the child that proved most useful to them. Jujinta then immediately stated that he would rescue both of them and that neither child would have to answer for the horrible deeds he knew they must have committed to survive. In spite of this apparent kindness, he ended with adding that they'd only be forgiven once they answered Yang Chen and Kavik's questions. Both Hsien and Raitei broke down sobbing as a result of this cruel manipulation. The children recounted their time on the island to the Avatar and her companion. When Raitei explained what the firebenders had done in his group, Yang Chen ran toward the water and had it explode within, allowing her to reveal a chain and cuff that prospective combustion benders had been held underwater. Once Yang Chen confirmed with Raitei that only 3 full combustion benders had left the island, she led Hsien and Raitei away as the Avatar's party prepared to depart. Raitei was suspicious of the Avatar's flying bison, Nujia, and seemed much more cautious than Hsien. When the Avatar's party took off, Raitei feigned sleep to listen in on the conversation Yang Chen and her companions were having. He heard the Avatar speculate how Raitei would be of high value for Chai-Si, as he would be the closest person in the world to unanimity once Thapa was neutralized. Jujinta remarked that Raitei would be worth his weight in platinum several times over. She decided that the best move for the time being would be to have the children sequestered until the high-stakes situation was over. When the group descended on the outskirts of Taku, Raitei crawled to the top of a grassy knoll that Nujian had landed beside, and surveyed the area to make sure that nobody'd spotted them. Yang Chen promised Xian that she and her companions would do all they could to make things right. Raite proceeded to ask Yang Chen if she was truly going to take down the people who ran the camp and if she would bust Chai Si. As a certain expression made its way across Raite's face, Kavik realized that the firebender boy had learned information from feigning sleep and screamed to warn the Avatar. The waterbender tried to dive at Yang Chen and tackle her to the ground, but this diverted her attention from Raite's threat. Raite inhaled sharply as he tried to launch a combustion bending attack, but Nujian rammed into the boy. While a sound similar to combustion bending came forth from Raite, no explosion followed. Nujian was killed from the pressurized air that ensued, but Raite also died from his failed technique. Kavik saw a single small wound in the middle of his forehead, trickling blood over his skin, thinking that the pressure of his technique had failed to project past his skull, and sought a channel of escape. Do, Yang Chen's lifetime. Do was a firebender and a member of the Order of the White Lotus. He ran the cook staff in a food kitchen in Bin-Er during the early era of Yang Chen. Do trained with Kavik several times during the latter's training with the White Lotus in Bin-Er. Once he put a fire dagger to Kavik's throat as they sparred, close enough to leave a line of blisters. The firebender came to see Ayunarak at the secret basement beneath Gidu's shrine outside the hours of his regularly scheduled visits, bringing news about her being able to return to the Northern Water Tribe. His footsteps thus raised Kavik's immediate suspicion, causing the young firebender to launch water that he had pulled from the laundry towels at Do's feet, freezing his soles to the wooden planks. This, in turn, caused Do to pitch forward so violently that he fell out of his boots, with him cursing Kavik's name on the way down. However, Ayunarak reacted with blinding speed and unfroze the very water Kavik had used, sweeping it around in a lap and catching the laundry in a web of water, shoving it into a heap at the bottom of the stairs. Do landed in this unharmed, but the firebender shouted at Kavik over the serious injuries he might have endured. Ayunarak shut down the argument between the two men, though she took the opportunity to inquire why Do had come. The firebender whispered in the executor's ear to relay the lengthy message to her before giving him a head shake to indicate he should leave. The firebender balked when he realized his superior's plans would not involve him and gave Kavik a scowl as he tugged his boots back on. The young waterbender could not resist waving goodbye to Do as he left. Kavik came to see Do in Bin-Er 4 days after the raid on the Northern Air Temple, entering at a White Lotus tent at the outskirts of the city after exchanging the established passphrases. With Do qualified to speak and listen for Ayunarak in Bin-Er, Kavik reported the events of Zongdu Hensh's assassination, Thappa's jailbreak, and Zongdu Chaisi's plan to assassinate the world leaders at the convocation of Taku. Do snorted when Kavik was done explaining, remarking that it was the result of the White Lotus letting children sit at the big table. Kavik proceeded to explain unanimity was gone and gave Do Avatar Yang Chen's message requesting help from the White Lotus in keeping the world leaders far away from Taku. Do pondered the situation and noted that if it did not go as planned, Chaisi would suspect they were onto her and withdraw the combustion bender, leading the White Lotus to lose their chance at gaining control of him. Kavik was shocked that the White Lotus was willing to gamble with the fate of the four nations, but Do explained that war was a known quantity, unlike combustion bending. The firebender gave a calm and dispassionate speech on the White Lotus's ancient quest for balance and how they were the only party who could be trusted with control of unanimity. Kavik asked what would happen if everything went to pieces in Taku, and Do stated that the White Lotus watched the crisis unfold and adopt the best position to help the four nations in the aftermath, as they had always done. Do instructed Kavik not to leave Yang Chen's side in Taku, as the White Lotus wanted to know about leads on Thappa via Kavik if she found them there. He ended the meeting saying that he would relay Yang Chen's message to Ayunarak, but for Kavik not to expect a change in strategy, and told the waterbender to go back before the Avatar noticed he was gone. Do traveled to Taku in light of unanimity's threat to the convocation. He, Kavik, and Ayunarak sat together by the booth of a dumpling house in the city when the Avatar's companion gave the White Lotus an update on recent events. Kavik explained that his brother Kalyan had revealed that Chaisi knew Earth King Fei Shan was wandering the streets of the city in disguise. The young waterbender also gave a report on Yang Chen and her companions visiting an island in the Mosi Sea, where the initial experiments for unanimity had taken place, revealing the evidence of torture they had found and the testimony of a boy named Raite who had been involved in the combustion bender project. He also told them of the boy's death in a scuffle with Yang Chen's companions. Do rubbed his temples upon hearing this, berating Kavik for losing Raite, who he considered to have been a priceless new asset. Kavik was taken aback that both Do and Ayunarak seemed to care more about a potential asset than the death of a child, asking if they wanted to stop unanimity or simply own it. Ayunarak stated that both were important, as the best outcome of the ordeal was it ending with a neutral, unbiased, and experienced party firmly in control. When Kavik snorted at this, Do noted that Kavik likely thought the Avatar would be a better choice. Do explained that no single human could ever be truly rational or detached, unlike the White Lotus, which was formless and unburdened by outside appearances. Do did add that their efforts to find Thappa were not bearing fruit, admitting that locating the combustion bender may come down to Kavik and Yang Chen, but also stating that apprehending and keeping the combustion bender in custody were up to the White Lotus. Before the meeting ended, the group also agreed that they would not do anything about the Earth King, as Chai-Si was likely waiting until the other world leaders arrived to cause maximum destruction. As the mission to take control of Unanimity continued, Do was one of 7 White Lotus members who came to a small park in Taku and facing off against members of Zhongdu Chai-Si's Errand Runner Association. The order had started to focus on capturing Kalyan over finding Thappa, as they knew how important he was to Chai-Si's organization. Do readied a fire dagger as the two sides fanned around Kavik and Kalyan. The Waterbender brothers tried to get to cover, with Kalyan grabbing Kavik and shoving him down as the others fought. At the same time, Do and Tael started stalking one another through the struggle. The opponents came to grips inside each other's pockets, both becoming horrifically vulnerable to one another. A quick exchange of feints led to one of Do's limbs becoming trapped, and the fight was over before it properly started. Tael stabbed Do in the chest with his knife as the firebender slumped to his knees, face white and lips pressed together in a grimace. Tael kept the knife embedded in Do like a handle and quickly clamped his other hand over Do's mouth and nose to suffocate him faster. Do locked eyes with Kavik as he lay dying, with his last act being to raise his fingers with a spiteful glare. He was able to firebend an orange jet that lanced outward and seared Kalyan's arm, loosening the older waterbender's grip on Kavik and allowing the White Lotus member to stumble free. Do had thus given his life to the cause of his order. Zolian, Yang Chen's lifetime. Zolian was a Fire Nation Duke and the leader of the Sawan clan during the adolescence of Avatar Yang Chen. The Duke asked young Avatar Yang Chen for help after unseen forces caused damage to the edge of their villages in Ma Inca Island. He and his cousin and heir, Earl Lohi, worked with Yang Chen and agreed to appease the phoenix eel spirits of the island by staying more than 3 li away from the caverns where they lived. The disobedient branch families under the Sawan did not obey the agreement for too long and started excavating near the cenotes. As a result, the children of the Sawan were cursed by the spirits not to wake from their slumber and would eventually waste away. Zolian tried to appeal to Yang Chen by sending a messenger hawk, which arrived at Jonduri and fell into the possession of Zhongdu Chai-Si, passing it on to the Avatar. Before Yang Chen arrived, the rest of the Sawan tried to appeal to the spirits the best that they could by cutting off their top knots to show their dishonor. The Duke was informed that Yang Chen had arrived when he was still dealing with business with clan elders. Zolian then came to his private study to see her, bringing Lohi along with the box of top knots that had already been cut from other members. Yang Chen was furious about him breaking the agreement and did not want to hear anything he had to say for himself. She repeated the terms that they had originally agreed to, but Zolian could not respond adequately as to why it had been broken. He instead appealed to Yang Chen's sense of compassion about the children who had been cursed, asking if he could take her to the hospital, but she refused. Zolian and Lohi showed them the top knots to show their sincerity before cutting their own top knots off. The Avatar acquiesced, but the mental strain left the Duke incapable of further discussion, and left Lohi to discuss the situation further. Yang Chen and the spirits came to a second agreement that would release the children from the curse if they did not regrow their hair for 500
We'll probably
moons,
call it
would
a
suffer many
day
other
here.
inconveniences, hits to their coffers, and quirks to
It's
exclude
like
them from
only
Fire Nation
46
rituals,
minutes.
meaning that they would be disgraced
We
for a
could
generation,
go
but could rise
again, but
one
like
day and
fuck
not bring
it.
further
Nah,
wrath
I'm
of the spirits
tired.
upon themselves. Heiran, Kuruk's lifetime. Heiran was Avatar Kuruk's firebending teacher and one of his closest companions. Tasked with finding Kuruk's successor after his demise, she served as the firebending